Welcome back. Now, in a moment from now, I'm going to give you the answer to that question, why it is that becoming more self-aware is such a challenge for so many people. But before I do, I'd like to introduce a new idea to you, and I'm going to ask you to at least try this idea on for size, just for a moment, see how it fits. And I think this is going to help to explain things with a lot more clarity. So, when a lot of people come along to therapy, in fact, when people are speaking in day-to-day conversation, what you'll notice a lot of people say are words to the effect of, "Oh, that thing makes me really stressed," or "this particular thing makes me feel really anxious," or "I've been getting all these worrying thoughts," or "I've been getting these feelings have been happening to me." In other words, they're talking about their problems as though they are on the receiving end, as though the problem is out there external to them and they are just kind of a passive, almost victim of the problem. And here's the thing that I'd like you to consider changing your way of thinking about. If the problem is out there, beyond our control, then we have no ability to change it. We can't change it if it's out there beyond our control. However, if the problem is something that we are doing as a process, then that kind of gives us a sense of ownership over it. And if we have a sense of ownership over it, then we can accept the ability to change the problem. So from now on, or at least just for a while, I'd like you to consider saying those things in this way instead. Instead of saying, "that thing makes me feel really stressed," say, "I'm doing a lot of stress about that thing. I'm doing a lot of anxiety. When that happens, I do a lot of depression. I do worrying thoughts. I am the one doing the problem as a process." And see, even though that sounds easy to say, here's the hurdle that will stop a lot of people from being able to accept that kind of ownership over the problem, and that is this: that we tend to fall into the erroneous trap of associating the idea of accepting responsibility for something with accepting blame or fault. See, in a legal sense, if you are responsible for a traffic accident, that means that you are the at-fault driver. You are to blame for that. And that gives you a clue about why it is that it's such a challenge for us to look at ourselves in a way that's going to help us solve the problems that we are in fact doing. So think of it this way. Have you ever looked at a photograph of yourself when you were sort of caught off guard and you saw the way that you looked and you kind of cringed because you didn't like the way that you appear? Or you've heard a recording of yourself and you heard the sound of your own voice and you thought, "Oh, geez, I don't sound like that, do I?" I'm pretty sure most of us can associate with that. Now, remember back when I said that we're always communicating with ourselves, even though we don't realize that we're doing it? When we see or hear ourselves and we feel that way about ourselves, what kind of message do you think we're sending ourselves when we do that? See, here's the problem. Here's the reason why we don't become more self-aware more easily. And that is that we tend to be our harshest critics. We tend to fall into the trap of being very, very judgmental of ourselves. So judgmental that the moment that we start looking at ourselves from an outside observer's perspective, the very perspective that we need to see to be able to identify the problems and then identify the solutions, well, we become very resistant because of the pain of self-judgment. It's our own self-judgmental thinking, our own self-critical thinking that stops us or blocks us from becoming more aware of the very things that we need to realize in order to change. But the other thing that I would like you to become aware of is that when we start doing that self-judgmental thinking, for the most part, it's totally inaccurate. In other words, what we're seeing when we cringe and we feel really yucky when we see ourselves from that perspective is totally untrue. It's totally inaccurate. Think of it this way. Our loved ones They see us from those perspectives. They hear the way that our voice really sounds. They see all those things about us that we don't want to see from ourselves, and yet they still accept us, which means that we are more critical of ourselves than other people are. And if you don't believe that, well, think of it this way. Think of someone that you care for deeply, someone that you love. Isn't it true that if they were to see a photograph of themselves caught off guard, or if they were to hear a sound of their own voice, they would be more judgmental of themselves, more critical of themselves than what you are? See, this is the fundamental hurdle that stops us from becoming more self-aware. It's just our own self-judgmental thinking. It's untrue, it's unhelpful, it's inaccurate, and it blocks us from being able to make the changes that we are looking for, that we really need in order to be set free from the problems that are holding us back. Oh, and by the way, we learn to be self-judgmental from society. Society, especially the media is an expert teacher if you want to learn how to be judgmental of yourself. The thing is though, we often don't realize that we're learning to be self-judgmental because most learning actually happens unconsciously. The problems that we are doing, we have learnt to do them that way. We just didn't realize that we were learning them. And if that sounds strange, that we learn to do these problems, think of it this way. If you've always spoken English your whole life, if you were to write down every single word in your entire English vocabulary, realistically, how many of those words did you learn consciously? In other words, what percentage of your entire English vocab did you learn because you either looked it up in a dictionary or because somebody explained to you the meaning of the word, compared to the majority of those words which you just kind of picked up from your environment around you? You kind of just absorbed it through your experience in life without necessarily consciously learning the meaning of those words. In fact, most of what we know, most of what we do, we have learnt unconsciously. We just absorb or pick it up from our environment. We are creatures of our environment. But just like we learn to do these problems like self-judgmental thinking, just like with language, you can also consciously learn the meaning of words too. And so even though we've unconsciously learned to do these problems, we can consciously decide to learn to do the solutions instead. And in a moment from now, I'm going to show you a quick and simple little exercise that'll help sort of get you started learning how to undo self-judgmental thinking and instead learn how to do more compassionate thinking instead. To be able to see the missing pieces of the puzzles we require in order to be able to solve the current problems that we're doing, we first need to become more self-aware. But to become more self-aware, we need to be able to learn the very important skill of becoming self-compassionate. Now, being compassionate does not mean being sympathetic. That's two very different concepts. Sympathy is like taking an able-bodied person, putting them in a wheelchair and saying, oh, here you go, you poor thing, you are the victim of circumstance, beyond your control. Don't, whatever you do, get up and exercise the damaged muscles in your legs. Sit there until the muscles in your legs deteriorate and you're unable to walk at all. That's sympathy. Okay, it's done with good intentions, but it's very disempowering. Compassion, on the other hand, is simply saying, hey, I get it. It's okay. There's no judgment, there's no criticism, there's no condemnation, there's just understanding from a non-judgmental perspective.
When our problems are external to us, they're beyond our control, which makes us powerless to change them. When we take ownership of our problems by accepting that we are doing the problem as a process, we become empowered to make a change. Most people struggle with this, however, because they mistakenly associate responsibility with blame, because society teaches us to judge ourselves so harshly that our self-awareness can be painful at first. To get past that and become more self-aware, we need to learn to communicate with ourselves more compassionately. In the following video, Stuart shares a secret of the unconscious mind that will help you understand how to become more compassionate of yourself.